The Accord is a very important car for Honda, but it's currently struggling like never before, and in response, Honda has issued essentially an emergency update for the 2025 model year. Unless it's a mid-cycle refresh, Honda typically doesn't make any changes to its car, but I suspected that something was wrong because this was the last Honda to move over to the 2025 model year, and if there wasn't going to be any changes, it should have happened a little bit earlier. So what's new for the 2025 Honda Accord? Well, not much. I mean, there's only so much you can do on short notice, especially within the auto industry, but Honda kind of did their best to address a lot of customer complaints. For example, the previous LX model, the entry-level model, didn't have rear AC vents and charging ports, but now every Honda Accord comes with rear AC vents and charging ports. They've also added wireless charging to all hybrid trims, which makes sense because all hybrid trims come with wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. For the touring model, which is this one right here, they've added a heated steering wheel, which is something I've been taking complete advantage of because it's been like 60 degrees here in Southern California and I'm freezing. My hands are literally cold right now. But arguably the biggest upgrade was that they replaced the EX Accord with this new SE trim, and they added a few things, but mostly it was cosmetic changes. They blacked out the rims, the mirrors, the black trimming around the windows. I think that's welcome, but what they really needed to do was add an affordable Accord hybrid. The Accord needs an affordable hybrid option. The cheapest Accord hybrid is a full $5,000 more than the cheapest Camry, which comes standard with the hybrid powertrain. Buying a hybrid in 2024 isn't just about being green or saving money at the pump. They are a much better driving experience. They are much smoother, they're much more powerful, and they actually happen to be even more reliable. So since the Camry has that $5,000 edge in terms of starting price for the entry-level trims, I think that's really hurting Honda, and the sales data supports this. I just saw that the new Honda Accord sales data came out for last month, and 57% of Accord buyers are choosing the hybrid option, even though it has a $34,000 starting price, which I think is a big deal. If I were to test drive an Accord hybrid and a non-Accord hybrid, there is no way that you'd be able to convince me to buy a standard Accord with the 1.5 liter turbo. That's just how good the Accord hybrid is, and I really think people are gravitating towards that idea. In fact, if you look at the Civic and Accord sales for last year up to November, I believe, they were neck and neck, but the Accord has dripped behind. I think Accord sales are down by 20% while Civic sales are up 20%. I think what's happening is the Civic has become the cheap Accord hybrid. The Civic Hybrid Sport, which I drove, starts at around $30,000. That's $4,000 less than this. And the Civic Hybrid Sport Touring is about $32,000, $33,000, which is cheaper than the cheapest version of the Honda Accord. And you get things like leather seats and Google built in and all those bells and whistles, which you don't get on even the entry-level hybrid Accord. And I think that's kind of a big shame because this is a wonderful car. I love the Accord, especially this touring model, but I love the Accord overall because it's such a nicer riding car than the Civic, at least in my opinion. It's much quieter, it's much more comfortable. When you're driving at freeway speeds with the Civic Hybrid, you can barely have a conversation with the people behind you, but in the Accord, you can whisper to each other and hear each other perfectly fine. But if you agree with me, the good news is, as of right now, there's still a lot of 2024s on the market, and you can actually lease a 2024 Accord Hybrid Sport for less than you can lease a 2025 Civic Hybrid Sport. So I think this is actually a much better buy with the current market. But I don't know going forward with the 2025 model year if there's going to be incentives or things like that. But I have to say the Accord's a wonderful car. One of the biggest complaints about the new Accord is how it looks. And on TikTok, I did a little survey. I think I got about 500 votes by now. And 60% of people said this car is ugly, which I kind of disagree with. I think this is the nicest Accord Honda has ever made, with a few exceptions. I think the previous model had a much nicer, much more aggressive front end. I do not like that the bottom of this car is painted black. I really think that that's something that should be reserved for SUVs. And my third complaint is that this car has an unnecessarily long front nose. I don't know why there's so much overhang in the front and why it sticks out so far in the front, but it really doesn't look good. I'm going to show you what this car looks like by sort of squishing the front end with just using simple Photoshop, and you will see that it looks much nicer. You see, this car was at least in my opinion, modeled after one of the nicest looking sedans of all time, the Audi A7, and they did a pretty good job at that. I mean, look at how this car looks from this angle right here. This is a stunning looking car from certain angles, especially the one you're looking at from right now. I love this sort of fastback slope look. It looks just like the A7, but again, the proportions are just wrong in certain areas, and I don't know. Moving on to the inside of the Accord, we have one of Honda's nicest interiors with high quality materials and features across the board. Over here on the door, we have an acoustic glass for the touring model, soft touch plastic with a sort of leatherette plush here. I kind of wish they would interrupt the middle here with something other than this hard black plastic and kind of somewhat glossy plastic. Leather armrest over here, and over to the back, it's the same exact situation, same exact materials. They did not skimp out in any ways. I do appreciate that. The inside is a gray interior with leather trimmed seating. This means the parts where your body touches are leather. The parts where your body doesn't touch is a leatherette. Over here we have the new standard feature for all Accords, rear AC vents and charging ports. In the trunk, we have a massive trunk, but unfortunately no spare tire, but there's definitely space for you to put one if that's something you wanted to do. Moving on to the front, we have what is standard in all Accords, a 10-inch digital gauge cluster, which is great because a lot of other Hondas use this half digital, half analog gauge cluster, which I'm really not a fan of. Also exclusive to the Accord is this 12-inch display, not even the top of the line Honda Pilot Black Edition, which costs $55,000, does not come with a 12-inch display because this car doesn't have what I'd call an Acura problem. There's no Acura equivalent of the Honda Accord, which means you get the best of the best, including things like ventilated seats, which you don't get on the CR-V. Unfortunately though, you only get Google built in on the touring model, which is this model here. You don't get it on every Honda Accord Hybrid, which has this 12-inch display. I think that's a big shame because the starting price of the Accord Hybrid is $34,000, much higher than the Civic Si, which does come with Google built in, which cost around $29,000. The downside of the interior is the excessive use of black materials. Just about everything is a different material here, but you can see that it's all black. Gloss black here, hard touch plastic black here, softer touch plastic up here, piano black here, and if you get a black interior, this will also be black. This is just the interior color of the car. I do think they could have mixed things up with a little bit more spice. I mean, just looking at the door here, which is almost completely black, you can see just how much the door handle pops out. I did want to drive the Accord with you guys to kind of showcase how much nicer and quieter this is than the Civic Hybrid. I got to drive the Civic Hybrid Sport a couple of months ago, and I know a lot of you are going to say you should have drove the touring model because it has things like active noise canceling, and the engine just kicked on right now and I could barely hear it. If I had music playing, I wouldn't be able to hear it. But in the Civic Hybrid, you can tell when the engine kicks in, whether you're idling or on the freeway or just driving in general. It's not noisy, but it's very noticeable. While in the Accord, you'll maybe barely feel it. You might hear it a little bit if you accelerate hard, but it's extremely quiet, and that's one thing Honda did an exceptional job at. They did a great job in sort of dampening the noise, and I think that's where the Accord really separates itself. Now, another difference between the Accord and the Civic is the regenerative braking with the paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. The Accord has, I think, like 6 or 7 stops of regenerative braking, while the Civic only has 4 or 5. In other words, the Civic's regenerative braking from paddle shifting is basically useless. While the Accord provides so much regenerative braking, it feels as if the car is an electric car and that you could bring the car to a complete stop. But unfortunately, you have to use the brakes below 8 miles an hour or so. I think it would be really cool if you could drive the Accord as if it were an electric car with that sort of one-pedal driving experience. I don't know why you can't. Maybe it's the limited battery capacity and the worry that you might fill it up. I'm not sure. Another thing I wanted to mention was the fact that there are a lot of people who are disappointed that the Accord does not have a 2.0 liter turbo or the detuned Civic Type R engine, or of course the older V6 that was discontinued a while ago. But I have to say, the sort of disappointment is overblown. I was looking at some specs between the Accord 2.0 and the Accord Hybrid, and it turns out the Accord is faster from 0 to 30 miles an hour. From 0 to 40 miles an hour, the Accord Hybrid is only 0.1 seconds slower. And of course, a full-on 0 to 60, the Accord 2.0 is a full second faster than the Accord Hybrid. And the reason why the Accord is so good is because not only do you have nearly the same amount of torque, but you have all of that torque available from 0 RPM. It's instant torque, kind of like an EV. So of course on the freeway, the Accord Hybrid is going to be more sluggish than the 2.0 turbo, or if you're doing hard acceleration pulls above 30 miles an hour, the Accord 2.0 will be faster, but most people aren't doing that kind of driving. I will say though that it would have been nice if Honda sort of replaced the 2.0 with a dedicated unique powertrain, like an all-wheel drive Accord Hybrid setup with a triple motor or a third motor in the back that allowed you to have even more acceleration or more power. But in the end, the Accord Hybrid is a superior powertrain versus the 2.0 in my opinion. This has instant torque, it's faster from 0 to 30 miles an hour, like I said, nearly as quick 0 to 40, and you're getting double the fuel economy. Not to mention, it's far smoother, it's far quieter, it's far more comfortable and more luxurious. So I really do think that the 2.0 V6 Accord thing is kind of overblown because the hybrid is better in my opinion. In the end, the Accord Hybrid is a wonderful car. I think this thing is underrated and honestly misrepresented by a lot of people, including myself, which is ironic because the only reason why I ever ended up in an Accord is by making a video calling it a flop on TikTok, which gathered quite a bit of attention, and I have to say I've been quite humbled by the experience in this Accord. After having driven the Civic, the Odyssey, and a couple of other Hondas, this is by far my favorite Honda I've driven so far. It is a wonderful car. If you buy one, you're probably not going to be disappointed. I will say though, if you are debating between the Accord Hybrid and the Civic Hybrid, you have to drive both to sort of get a feel for which one you want. And don't just drive it around the block, make sure you get some freeway miles on it because the Accord is much quieter and much more refined. However, if you do like that sort of sportier drive, you are going to have a nice sportier drive in the Civic. But for me, I really do love the Accord, and because this car is so good, I probably would pick it over the Civic. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Honda for loaning me the Accord Touring for a week, and I'll see you on the next one with a new car from a new brand. We're going to be looking at the Mazda 3 next, and I'll see you then.